What is up, people? Today I'm doing something a little different, which is taking a look at one single game, since every video I've uploaded so far to this channel has contained 6 to over 50 titles. And that's because this game, while not a favorite of mine in the Game Boy library, is still one of the most important games released for the system, as it would lead to a Fox guy you may have seen before. And I don't think I'd get much of a chance to talk about it if I didn't make this video, which would be a real shame since this game is a one-of-a-kind for the system. There really is nothing else like it. X is a Japanese exclusive game that was originally going to be localized as Lunar Chase, which I did fully translate into English, but it never released since Nintendo of America felt that American kids were far too stupid to handle this type of game. But this fully localized version would eventually release during the 2020 Nintendo data leak, which would cause someone to release their unfinished fan translation the same day. So whichever one you choose to play is up to you. Despite this leak, this game still hasn't really received much attention at all, which is why I'm here to determine once and for all. Is X for the Game Boy a good game? Well, it's no doubt an impressive game, as it's one of the only 3D Game Boy games along with Faceball 2000, although it feels like Faceball 2000 relies much more on novelty factor as it very quickly becomes repetitive, while X feels more like a fully fledged experience. And unlike Faceball 2000, it's also only available on the Game Boy, although this game is actually designed after another Argonaut game, Starglider 2 on the Amiga. So the game starts out with what is easily the longest tutorial of any Game Boy game. It took me like 25 minutes to finish. I mean, seriously, this is longer than modern game tutorials. So in that way, you could say the game is ahead of its time. Now, do I think the tutorial was needlessly long and you could have just read the manual or just figured out how to play the game? Absolutely. But seeing as this game is labeled as a space combat simulation, for the sake of immersion, it makes sense that they would want the player to go through some sort of training before you start your missions. But the tutorial is also completely optional, so you can just choose not to engage with it. Much like X, Star Fox was originally going to allow you to fly in all directions, until they were inspired by shrine gates and instead made the game a rail shooter. That ended up working quite well for Star Fox, as it's more of an arcade game, with much higher gameplay density and runs at a whopping 15 frames per second. X, on the other hand, has a lot less going on and runs at like 3 frames per second. That is, when there's a lot of stuff on the screen. When there's nothing on the screen, it runs actually pretty fast and you'll see the timer goes down much faster. So for the first mission, when there's really nothing going on, the game feels kind of fast and smooth. You go around looking for a crystal, and once you find it, you bring it to the nuclear silo. When you're nearby the crystal or silo, the game will indicate what direction you need to go in with an arrow, making it even easier. But that's the problem with X. When there's no gameplay, the game is fast, but as soon as there's stuff on the screen, the game is too damn slow. It's not really apparent in the first mission, but we'll see it becomes a problem later on. It might be one of the only few non-RPG Game Boy games that benefits from you turning on fast forward if you're playing with an emulator, as your performance is not going to really be hindered. And yeah, there's really not a lot going on until an enemy appears occasionally, which you'll be able to see on your radar, and the game gives you a sound indication, with admittedly rather grating music and an obnoxious alarm. Mission O2, as you might have guessed, is also very straightforward and easy. All you have to do is locate 5 time bombs on the map and blow them up with your missiles, and you can equip the lock-on equipment in the defense station to help your aim. Doesn't really matter though, since the time bombs are just stationary. It's just a matter of searching for them in the different areas. Seeing as there's nothing really going on this map, you might not find it all that fun. Mission 3 though is a bit more exciting. Instead of locating something stationary, you have to destroy these robot tanks who are going around destroying your radar stations, and they require 4 rocket strikes to destroy. They move pretty fast, I'm not gonna lie. I was pretty intimidated the first time I saw these guys. So pretty impressive what they've managed to do here with the Game Boy limitations. Just make sure you have enough rockets for when you do find them, and you lock on so you don't run out of time. I would say this is the first mission in this game I actually liked, since it's the first mission where they throw you right into the action. Mission 4 though is not so good, since the only challenge is knowing where you need to go, which you certainly won't your first time through. Once you do know where to go though, it becomes incredibly easy, since there's only 2 possible locations that you actually need to go to. There's 15 alien bases, but you can ignore 13 of them, if you know where to look.
Spoiler alert, it's always Area 3 or 6.
And you're looking for a scientist that you need to rescue by destroying one of the alien bases, who will appear as a funny little stick man. There's a 50% chance that the scientist will be an alien imposter though, so be sure not to bring this one back to the nuclear silo, since the only objective of this guy is to waste your time. And that's the thing with this mission, if you don't know where to go, you'll just run out of time, which is incredibly annoying your first time through. This wouldn't be so bad if the game had unlimited continues, but it doesn't. And the continue system is my least favorite thing about this game. Basically, you have to spend stars that you earn from completing the levels, but the cost of continuing is also really messed up. There's no saving in this game, so what level you start over on after game overing is completely dependent on how many stars it costs. For example, Mission 2 costs 1 star to continue, while Mission 10 costs a whopping 9 stars. So if you game over on Mission 10 you have 10 stars, that means the first time you continue you'll have to spend 9 of your stars to retry the mission. If you game over again and you want to continue, you'll have only 1 star, which means you have to start over on Mission 2. They could have just used passwords or something like a normal video game, or better yet, could have just had a save feature because it's a damn Game Boy game. This game is directed by Yoshio Sakamoto, who, as you guessed, might know a thing or two about saving, so the fact that it's not here, what the heck, man. So basically, this handheld Game Boy game has no pick up and play quality. They want you to finish this game in one sitting. The game took me 1 hour and 40 minutes in my successful playthrough, but I've seen it take most people over 2 hours. Why even make this on Game Boy if you're gonna miss the entire point of the system? With this design, it would have made much more sense to put the game on something else. But the truth is that Argonaut Software is more interested in seeing if they can get 3D to work on any device they touch, instead of thinking about the actual player experience and the entire point of the Game Boy.
At Argonaut, I think Jez especially prided himself on the fact that Argonaut could make 3D run on anything. And when he saw the Game Boy, I think he saw the chance of proving that 3D could run on it, because obviously it was a 2D machine. No one had even thought of doing 3D on it.
Unfortunately, how many stars you get is not dependent on performance, as it should be, but is instead dependent on time sink. You can stick around in these levels and basically farm enemies, so that you get more stars upon completing them, which is not at all the same as being rewarded for shooting enemies as you fly through in Star Fox, since in that game you'll pretty much be going through at the same pace no matter what. It's a rail shooter and you don't exactly have to search for the enemies, so X just wants you to go around and shoot enemies, which is not difficult or skillful or anything. As you might have guessed, the combat is on the shallow side. It's just time consuming. If they gave you stars based on how fast you complete the missions, then they'd be grading you based on performance, which would actually make sense and add to its replay factor, since you'd be rewarded for getting better at the early levels. Anyway, a limited continue system like this makes sense for something like Star Fox, being an arcade style game with extremely high replayability for a lot of reasons. I feel like I don't really have to explain why if you're familiar with Star Fox. I remember when I got my hands on the 3DS game, I cleared it over 20 times, not because I had to, but because it was really fun and I wanted to see all the different routes and try to do a little bit better each time. There's nothing like that here with X. It's always the same 10 missions, most of which are uninteresting, and one of which is an absolute chore and ruins any potential replayability this game could have had, but we'll get to that soon enough. But anyway, in Star Fox 3D, they still made sure you can save and pick up where you last left off, unlike the original on N64, because it would be blasphemous to not allow that for a game on a handheld system. Unfortunately, X here didn't get the memo. Basically, X is a game that requires you to replay it, since you'll definitely be failing some of these missions your first time through if you don't know what to do. Yet the game has no replay factor, that's the problem. And the lack of replayability is not only because of how the game is designed, but also because the game tends to be played at a snail's pace. And whoops, let's get back to talking about the actual missions. I seem to have gone on a 3-minute rant about the continue system. So mission 5 is basically a ripoff of the ending of A New Hope. You gotta find these opening and closing entrances to 2 tunnels, and you gotta enter them and drop a bomb when the game gives you the signal. And the tunnels are probably what this game is best known for, which by the way, they were inspired by the ZX Spectrum game Micronaut 1. But anyway, this game is known for them because 1, they look cool, but also it contains a very iconic music track that you may have heard already, and mistook for Star Fox music when playing on Lilac Cruise, since Sakurai sneakily put it on there. You may have even seen a cappella covers of the tunnel scene music by people who have never even played the game. That's how iconic it is. And it is a banger tune. I'm playing it in the background right now, but I have to admit it's the only tune in the game that I actually like. And it's not a coincidence, no other music from this game made its way into Smash Bros. Or gets covers. Despite all this though, you don't actually have to enter these tunnels all that often. My impression was that they would be a huge part of the game before I played it, but I ended up not using them very much. You can use them to get from one side of the map to another without the timer going down. Basically, instant travel is not actually instant because you still have to go through the tunnel scene, but it does stop the time. You can also use the tunnels to resupply your shield, rocket, and fuel, but it's really up to you whether you think these tunnels are actually worthwhile or not. I just didn't really find myself using them. But the exception of course is this mission which forces you to use them, which I think is just fine. Only thing that can go wrong with this mission is if you're like me, you forget to equip another bomb after dropping the first one because unlike the rockets, you can only hold one bomb at a time, so you gotta go back to the defense station to equip another. It's pretty awkward doing the whole tunnel scene only to realize there's no cue to drop the bomb because you don't have one. Next I get to talk about my least favorite mission, which is basically this game's version of an auto-scroller. You're completely at the mercy of these 4 trucks you must accompany on their way to the nuclear silo. This mission is extremely slow. I don't know how to describe how long it is because the time actually counts down from 99 in this game. So I'll just say that this mission starts with 50 time. Of course, how fast this time actually goes down depends on how many things are in view. Since you're escorting 4 trucks that are not lacking in polygons, things can be on the slower side here. These trucks combined with power-ups you get and leaping insects that come into view that are trying to destroy the trucks, means the game is going to be excruciatingly slow. That wouldn't be too bad if the trucks didn't have to travel much distance, I suppose, but they travel like the entire map. So when I finish this mission, there's only 12 time left. I mean, just look at what this mission does to the pacing of this speedrun here, making up 25% of the entire run. The only thing you can try and do to make this mission go by faster is to look off screen at nothing so the game won't slow down. But you also have to pray that the trucks won't get destroyed while you're looking off screen. It doesn't take many hits at all from enemies for this to happen. So minus the fact that this is the longest mission, it's also the second hardest mission because it takes very little to fail, as you're protecting not 1 but 4 fragile trucks. It's also extremely easy to accidentally hit your own trucks as they suddenly come into view while you're fighting off enemies. Unfortunately, this has happened to me so many times. You can also deal damage just by bumping into them. But also, the leaping insects can only be destroyed with rockets. There were times when a truck would come into view while I was firing one at an enemy, and the rocket just one-shots the truck. The difficulty means you'll be replaying this excruciating mission more than any other, the least replayable mission. Why couldn't one of the shorter missions be the challenging one? This mission is single-handedly why replaying this game is so dreadful. I mean, really, the other missions are over so quickly, but mission 6 is going to take you some time no matter what, and there's no fun to be had with it. This mission could be more forgivable if this game had passwords or a passable continue system, but it doesn't. The game demands to be replayed over and over again, despite containing this awful mission. Without it, this game would be almost recommendable. Still not a favorite of mine, but nothing too terrible and fine to experience just once. But unfortunately, this is terrible. And hopefully I've made my point, moving on to not so terrible missions now. Mission 7 sees you hunt down these gliding enemies holding onto your rods, which are important for some reason I guess. You have to retrieve 4 of them back, and to hunt them you have to take flight. You can fly in this game either by equipping the jetpack item, or by going off the pyramid ramps while activating turbo speed. Once you get these rods, you just take them back to the nuclear silo to complete the mission. Luckily for me, my favorite thing to do in this game is just flying around shooting stuff, probably because I like Star Fox. Although because this game is open and not a rail shooter, it can be quite hard to actually line up with stuff, given the low frame rate, which is why equipping the lock-on item can be quite useful and preferable over the jetpack, since you can always just fly using the ramps. In Mission 8, you need to destroy these cocoons using rockets by equipping lock-on. If I remember correctly, you can't fire any rockets without lock-on, which is just silly, but anyway. Nothing all too bad happens if you let these cocoons hatch. I let them hatch every time and it didn't matter since they just hatch into these butterfly things, which try to destroy all your radar stations. They feel a lot less threatening than the giants on Mission 3. They are very easy to track and kill, and I don't think they ever got close to destroying all the radar stations. So another easy flying and shooting mission, which is just fine by me. They're my favorite after all, but like I said, it can be annoying to line up to properly shoot stuff. Mission 9 is the shortest mission in the game, and that's because if you don't stop these missiles within the small time you're given, they'll destroy the nuclear silo and you'll fail. So anytime you get close to these missiles, you gotta make it count. So if you miss one of the missiles, you have to restock, which is quite bad since it'll waste precious time. I like this mission quite a bit actually, and wish there was more like it. It's the 3rd shooting and flying mission in a row. Despite being the shortest, it's the most exciting. I wish there were more short but high risk missions like this in the game actually. They could have replaced Mission 6 with something fun, and it would have made the game a whole lot better. I must admit though, I don't really feel that in control of whether my rocket actually hits these things, since they may very well decide to move out of the way. But more often than not, it's not really a problem at all. The rare hexagon item that these missiles drop after they're destroyed, you should make sure to get since the item gives you a full refill on shields, fuel, and rockets. This is extremely valuable when going into the next and final mission. And the reason for this is because having full shield and rockets is a requirement for clearing Mission 10, as it's the only mission that requires the high EX weapon, and that's because it's so destructive that it damages you as well. I have no idea why 8 rockets are required though. Making it to the enemy flagship with full health is challenging enough with all of the mines and turrets guarding it, but making it there with full health and rockets is a miracle, which is not really an exaggeration. There is a lot of RNG involved, as you need to hope the enemies will drop health or rockets or whatever you need in the moment. It's infuriating when the game keeps giving you fuel when you don't need it. You're not given much time to complete the mission either, which is too bad since it can take you a while before you get the supplies you want. I should mention that things like tunnels and radar stations that you use to resupply are quickly destroyed on this map, so that's why you have to rely on what the game decides to give you when destroying enemies or objects. I found that the Mario blocks are very useful on this level because of this, and there's always a chance they might drop the rare hexagon item, but there's also a chance that the enemies might destroy these blocks, or you just get fuel like me in this footage here. A mission like this being so RNG dependent makes the continue system all the more blasphemous, as this being the final mission costs a lot of stars to continue. It's actually a bigger advantage going into this mission with, for example, 17 stars instead of 18. With 17 stars, at least you'll start on mission 9, which gives you the hexagon item that gives you full refills that you desperately need, which is a huge advantage going into mission 10. With 18 stars, you're stuck continuing on mission 10 starting with no rockets, a huge handicap, and you gotta pray you can somehow fill all your rockets back up. Really, I just hope that an elusive hexagon drops. There's a high chance if you don't get the hexagon, you'll just run out of time, going all over the map to somehow acquire 8 rockets. This mission reminds you how much the poorly designed continue system really sucks. While mission 6 is just boring, mission 10 is infuriating and I raged more than a few times. When you do manage to make it to the enemy flagship with full health and rockets and manage to destroy it, it is a big relief and a good feeling though, but not really one of accomplishment. It's more like a relief that I don't have to play the game anymore. So do I think X is a game worth playing today? While I'm grateful for this game's existence since it would pave the way for the earliest 3D Nintendo games like Star Fox, but also Argonaut would go on to start developing a rejected 3D Yoshi game that would eventually turn into Croc. According to Jess Son, the founder of Argonaut, the prototype of this game that was pitched for Nintendo was a huge inspiration for the creation of Super Mario 64. So yeah, without a doubt, this is one of the most important Game Boy games ever made, which is why I just made an entire video on it, and the fact that it's a 3D game on the Game Boy of all things is just crazy. I would say if you're interested, go ahead and check it out, but I really don't think it's a must play. Everyone is impressed by the visuals here, which you can just use videos to witness without having to actually play the game. It's the design of this game that I'm not keen on. Of course, the game's also, unsurprisingly, lacking in playability. Everyone complains about the frame rate in Star Fox being bad, and if that's the case with you, you're gonna have one heck of a time playing X. But the main reason why I can't recommend that you go out of your way to play or finish the game is a dreadful Mission 6 and the terrible continue system. I really think that they needed to prioritize the portability factor of this title. I have, though, been playing the DSiWare sequel x-scape, a much more obscure game, probably one of the most obscure Nintendo sequels in general, seeing as it's a DSi game, and the game itself picks up 20 years after the original with the same characters. This game obviously doesn't have the same issue of a low frame rate, though it does have some slowdown at times. And the game saves so you can just pick it up to play and also stop at any time. While I haven't finished the game yet, because I can just take my time with this one and play one level at a time, instead of having to play through the entire game like X. Although I'm not sure it's the better game. The game seems really long. Just look at all these different worlds, and to get to these worlds you have to go around collecting stars to activate portals, and that's what leads you to this game's tunnel scenes. So yeah, you gotta go through the tunnels a lot more in this one, and this game in general feels too repetitive to me. It's kind of got that modern game problem of drastically lowering the difficulty, greatly increasing the overall length of the game, which ends up being you just doing the same things over and over. I think I prefer what the original X game did of just going from level to level, rather than having pointless repetition in between. I almost forgot to mention as well I'm not really a fan of this game's odd touchscreen controls either. Somehow I prefer how a 3D game handles on the Game Boy. It was just a bad frame rate and slowdown that would make it hard to line up with things. I've yet to finish x-scape though. There's actually like no footage of this game online, so you can't even see the full game. So I do want to experience it for myself. So I am still curious enough to see everything in this game. I can't go too in depth talking about this game at the moment, but it was definitely something I should bring up. So that concludes my video on X. I greatly respect the existence of this game. I unfortunately can't say I'm a fan of actually playing it though, but this game definitely deserved to make it outside of Japan, and it's a shame that it didn't. But you yourself, if you're curious, can always experience the leaked localization. But without this game, I don't know what the future of Nintendo's 3D games would have even looked like. We wouldn't get Star Fox, which would be a huge shame, and we might have not even got Mario 64. But anyways, if you'd like to see more Game Boy game videos like this in the future, and I have a ton planned, subscribe for more.